Hello there, and welcome to today's live stream. Today, we're going to be digging into the growth story of a company called FairShake. They built a platform that helps people and companies resolve disputes through this process of consumer arbitration. In plain English, basically what it means is that they help people get paid when they've been wronged by a big company. And so FairShake works with all kinds of companies like AT&T and Verizon, PayPal, Chase, American Express, and many others. And they help resolve issues like being overcharged or being charged hidden fees or refusing when companies refuse to issue a refund. Through this consumer arbitration process, they've received settlement offers from companies they receive settlement offers from companies to repay or refund for lost time and funds. And since launching in 2017, FairShake has scaled to over 50,000 visitors per month in organic traffic, and they've generated more than $3 million in arbitration settlement offers for their users. So we have two members of the team who are going to be joining us today, Max and Lou, and we're going to be talking about the process that they've used, the strategy from an SEO and a content marketing perspective, and how they've sort of scaled this B2C or this consumer tech platform to really reach the right people, bring those people in, and then help them resolve this sort of pseudo complex legal process. So Max is the co-founder of FairShake and the head of growth, and Lou is a senior manager of content and social. Our team at Optimist, we were fortunate enough to work with Max and Lou at FairShake for a while, and we've seen the site and the business grow like crazy over the last couple of years. And so I'm really excited to have them on to talk today and learn more about their story and about how they've been able to achieve such cool things. So with that said, let's have them join us. I'm going to add Max and Lou to the stream now. Hey, y'all. How are you doing today?
Doing good.
Yeah, good. The sun is trying to actually break out here in San Francisco. So
all right. Well, it's like a holiday then.
Summer experience.
That's awesome. That's it. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. Again, I'm always just I remember the first conversations that you and I had, Max, back when I was out in San Francisco actually several years ago now, and we were talking all about FairShake and that kind of stuff. Can you actually remind me what is sort of the origin story? How did you get involved in the company?
Yeah, so I mean, FairShake, it's an interesting story. So like you said, I'm a co-founder, but our CEO, who's like the original founder, his name is Teal, and so it's really his baby in a lot of ways. He's actually an attorney, which I'm not, and so after some time working, in like a big white shoe law firm in New York, and then he had a different startup in a different field that didn't work out, and then he was working at LegalZoom, and along the way he figured out basically this you were talking about consumer arbitration. It's basically this clause in every contract that you have with a big company that's arisen over the past 10 years that stops you. It's meant to eliminate class action lawsuits, but realize that it's also meant to actually make it possible to get individual issues addressed, and no one was really using it. So he had this inspiration basically to actually just follow the rules and do this on his own really terrible travel experience, and then started talking about it with people, and everybody was like, oh wow, I have that issue, or someone I know has an issue like that, and he actually worked in new product development at LegalZoom, but they didn't really want to do it, and so eventually he started kind of doing it as a one-man show on his own, and then figured out how to scale it into a sustainable product.
I feel like that's always the best startup origin story is your own professional expertise plus some personal vengeance.
Yeah, I mean, he was so well aligned as the person to do this, which I think is something after a little bit of time working in tech, I think is really important actually, is especially if you're gonna join up with something, are they the right people? Is it the right person for the space? And I kind of, I lucked out a bit, but I think I had a pretty complementary skill set because I worked on like more analytical and like finance side. And another kind of good thing for a convenient thing for us as a startup is like, if you don't have to pay lawyers and you don't have to pay like accountants, because like you can do stuff, most of that stuff in-house and have better visibility on it. Like that's also nice. But
yeah, but
we can talk it.
company's basically free to run now. Yeah, that's awesome. Also, well, I'd love to just, I guess, to set the stage here for the conversation that we're gonna have today. Can you fast forward us to the present? FairShake as a company, where are things right now?
Yeah. So about 2 years ago, we raised a seed round that was led by First Round Capital, which is a venture capital firm here in San Francisco. And so like our goal over those 2 years basically was to build out the technical side of our product, to have a sustainable way of driving settlements, driving revenue. And we've done well on that front. Like we're now bringing in 3,000 new claims a month. Like you said, you know, we've driven over $3 million in settlement offers, but and that may be an underestimate, but most of that has come this year. So we're really we're really at an inflection point. We've gotten a couple. You know, we were named a Time Best Invention of 2020, which is something that I think is a cool thing to call out. We're at this like we're at a phase where we've like made we're ready to make the leap, I think is where I'd say right.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah, and as I shared in the intro, you know, I remember the early conversations when I think you maybe had just raised the seed round, or maybe even hadn't raised it yet, and so you know, I think at that point you were like manually processing claims and things like that when they came through. So to see that scale is pretty amazing.
I think we had raised it but not announced it, or maybe raised it but not like signed the docs.
Right. Yeah, it was somewhere in that in between phase. So just to give us like a sense of scale, like how what is the addressable market of folks who have these sort of arbitration eligible claims?
So like at the high level, we look at this number where every year, according to surveys, 40% of US households have some sort of consumer dispute that's not effectively addressed by customer service. So like not every single one of those people or every single one of those disputes is something that we can help with. But like if you think about all the different industries that pull sketchy moves, and like, so if it's your phone provider or your internet provider, but also if it's your bank or your gym or, you know, your Peloton, like all sorts of different industries where people now are under these contracts where if you have an issue and if like they tell you you're out of luck, like this is your legal recourse. So, you know, we think that there's unfortunately millions of people out there every year who could benefit from our help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then I think like the challenge, of course, as you sort of alluded to there, is when people run into these challenges, they don't even necessarily know that this is an option, let alone that there's a service that helps them through the process, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think actually that is where Google comes in, right? Is like, what do people do when they don't know what to do? And figuring out like, you know, if people are motivated enough, they're out there searching for what they think they want and like figuring out how to get in front of them and then like, basically, you know, make them educate people because nobody like comes to us exactly knowing what like consumer arbitration is, but educate people that like, hey, if this is what you're like worried about right now, motivated about right now, this is actually the type of thing that we can help you with and we're the resource for.
Right. Yeah, and I think like the content on your site and the way that it's set up is such a great example of sort of really thinking about the buyer's journey, because you do have to like very specifically move those consumers in most cases through each step, right? Like they start with a problem, like I got screwed over by my cable company or whatever, and they have no idea what the solution is to that. They don't know, they've probably never heard of consumer arbitration. So you have to first like educate them, as you mentioned. You've got to walk them through, you got to show them how it works, and then you've got to build the trust and actually get them into to use the actual platform. So there is a very distinct process, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, one of the things that helps us is like we have a very low barrier to entry because we're like, you only pay us if you win, and then people are like, oh well, that sounds like what a scam would say. So figuring out how to then combine that with with different markers of our trustworthiness, which like the awards and reviews and stuff help with. But yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. We didn't really set out to be doing content marketing. We thought we were just creating landing pages and that they had to be somewhat educational so that Google would let us use the keywords that we wanted to use. And then we just kind of started getting some organic traction on some of them, hacked together a way to like build that into a larger set of pages. And then, yeah, when we had a little more resourcing, we brought in the big guns at Optimist.
Nice. Yeah. That's I think that's super fascinating. So yeah, you just kind of found your way into content marketing, as I think a lot of people do. But I mean, at least from what I've seen, that has been SEO and content have been a huge driver for you. Can you just talk a little bit about now where FairShake is at and what the content SEO strategy looks like?
Lou, I think that's one for you.
Yeah. So I think Max touched on something which is interesting, which is like Max and the team before me had put up all these landing pages that were intended to convert traffic into FairShake's product. And the challenging thing was like, okay, you have all these landing pages, they convert really well, but they kind of all answer the same question, but about a different company. So how do you expand that to get people coming in the door that have different questions about all these companies? And so I would say that the strategy now is kind of the solution to that question. How do we get more people with different varieties of problems coming in the door? And so our strategy right now really comprises of content pages, within that being what we still consider like a landing page. It's a page that's really supposed to convert traffic, and also consumer guides that are more high quality, long form content. And then we have on the other side kind of links back to us. And that's the piece that I think has generated a lot of the growth we've seen on the SEO side, because it means that not every single page that we publish needs to convert people really, really well, because some pages are there so that we get links and so that we answer people's questions and they remember us. And all of those things feed into a well-rounded content strategy that ultimately is there to drive traffic from Google.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's something that I always preach, and I'm not taking credit for the strategy here by any means, but is giving every piece of content a specific job, and it doesn't have to be the same job, right? Like it can do a specific thing within the confines of your strategy, and then work together to drive the outcome that you're ultimately aiming for. Yeah. And so just to summarize that, Lou, so for folks, I'm hearing is like, first of all, you've got kind of these like high intent, like high conversion, like landing pages. You've got more like informational guides, and you've got what I would characterize as kind of link building content, being content that is more specifically designed just to attract links to kind of help raise the ship, so to speak.
Yep.
Awesome. And I guess maybe this is already sort of answered in the premise there, but where do you see actual conversions of users coming from in terms of across those different types of content?
Yeah, so those original landing pages that Max, put up 2 years ago or whatever, those and their cousin pages, which are like the same kind of landing page but different companies, are still our best converters. And those pages are generally ones that capture people who are typing into Google how to sue horrible big company we hate. And the reason this works is people have high intent. They're like, I'm annoyed enough that I would sue a company as big as this. And also, they can't join a class action lawsuit against these companies for the most part, based on what their problem is. And so we kind of have this gap that we fill where we can find these people who are high intent and they're willing to do about the hardest thing you can possibly do in the US. But we give them an option that's actually feasible and realistic, and we can show results. And so the pages that kind of fill that gap are the best converters. But then there's some other pages that just get so much traffic that even though their rate of conversion is pretty low, they're still good, revenue drivers for us because of how people they bring.
Right. And so how would you just to characterize for folks on the stream here, how do you kind of handle that? I would say there's a little bit of a redirection that's happening here, right? So someone's coming in and saying, how do I sue Verizon? Mm-hmm. And you have to first sort of explain the facts of life to them, right? Like you can't, but here's another, how do you sort of lay that out for the reader?
I mean, I think exactly what you said is kind of the crux of it, which is like the first thing we always want to do on a content page is acknowledge the reader's problem and say, we know what your problem is. We get it. You're also not alone. Like other people have come to us with this problem. And then we kind of level with them and we're like, look, you could go to small claims court. You probably don't want to. And here's why. And we kind of list out the reasons why that's a less realistic scenario. And maybe the outcome won't be as good for them. And then we go into our pitch. And our pitch is, it's okay that small claims court or a class action lawsuit won't work for you. You can still solve your problem. And we know how. So tell us what your problem is, and we'll help you with it.
Just like we help those other people who have the same problem.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
And
right. Yeah. The social proof element is the key thing, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And how do you see the role of kind of that maybe the in between content there, the educational content, and how does that play into the strategy?
Yeah. I mean, the obvious piece being keywords and signaling that we understand the language of this problem. We use the language that professionals in this space use, but also we are uniquely positioned to help you as a consumer out because we're not lawyers and we don't work for these big companies. So I think that kind of middle content is important for a brand aspect, but also for the actual conversion of being we get it. And we do have authority in the space, but we're not the authorities that you're wary of. And that's the real trick, right?
Because I do think that sometimes there's high intent people, but there's also, like Liz is saying, there's these people in a middle ground, just talking to a lot of people about FairShake, you get a lot of people who say, oh, I didn't even know an option like that existed, who, maybe if they learn a little bit more, will be looking for it. So our highest intent people are always people who already know they want to take action, but there's a lot of people out there just looking to educate themselves as well.
Mm-hmm. For sure, yeah. And so can you give us some examples of what that content is, that sort of educational content?
Sure. I mean, a lot of the pages that Optimist helped us put up, I think kind of falls into that category, while also being in the category of we can get links out of these. Mm-hmm. But I think, how to get a refund is one of our top pages. That's one that y'all put out. And that piece is not about arbitration at all. It's not even really about what we do. Our service can help you get a refund, but that's not really necessarily the primary thing. But that page is super high quality, really, really in depth in a approachable way, and it's super informative. That's a great article. And we have kind of a series like that we call consumer guides. We just published one today, which is about bundling your home internet, cable, and phone service, and what are the risks and what are the benefits. These are things where people who are asking questions about them may have use for our service and they may not, but we still want them on our page. We still want them reading our content and getting something out of it.
I was just going to say, I like the recent piece is like an interesting example, right? Because Teal, the CEO, our resident lawyer, was like, hey, like, when these companies are trying to push now that you bundle your cell phone service in with your home internet and whatever else, it makes it a lot more dangerous for people because it makes it a lot easier to get your cell phone service cut off if you don't pay for those other services. And just like an interesting example of like the source of inspiration on that one.
That's actually a perfect segue into my next question, which is, where do the sort of the topics and the keywords come from? What's the process for defining, how you reach these folks at the various stages of their journey?
Yeah, I think it depends on kind of the stage of growth that we're in. So there's been times where our primary objective is to just increase the breadth of keywords that we rank for. And in those cases, the easiest thing to do is to go into Search Console or any Google tools, keyword mining tools, and figure out like, okay, here's the content we have. Here's related keywords we could rank for if we made more content. And that's kind of the simplest way that we grew kind of horizontally our content. The other primary thing that we focus on now that it's more about kind of creating a variety of content that serve different purposes, is listening to the people who've already come through FairShake, have already gotten a resolution, and just like listening to the language they use and the problems they faced and how we were able to solve them, and generating content that way. That's one of the things that some of the things that have come out of that is like locked accounts for these kind of new alternative banking solutions, where like if they detect that you might be like a fraudulent seller, they'll just like block your account. That one came out of like people in our complaints forums and people submitting claims, and we're like, okay, we need to put an article up about this because clearly people are running into this, and we can do that. And I think we're very uniquely positioned in that our service is just designed so that people tell us their problems. We have a lot of content. Like we have a complaints form, but then we also have all these claims that are submitted to us. And we can on our back end filter by keywords, by company, and figure out like what are some of these complaints that are coming in the door that have more than one or two people, that we can then turn into an information article.
Yeah, that is an amazing treasure trove of information, and it's interesting because I think like you obviously have like the primary data source, but a lot of people try to emulate that in their content and SEO strategy, using like Quora or like Reddit or whatever, right? Like what they're really trying to do is extract that same thing. Like what are people talking about? What are the topics that they're discussing, and like what language are they using? But that's a super interesting like feedback loop that you all have with the platform, and so valuable. The other thing, Lou, I'm so glad you mentioned Google Search Console because that's one of my favorite things, and I feel like it's just criminally underused by SEO and content marketing people. Is like there are thousands of keywords that your website ranks for, but like really poorly, and you can build like new pages and new content around those keywords. Is that how you have used it in the past?
Yeah. Yes, and the most recent project that I used Search Console heavily for was updating all of our meta tags and meta descriptions, which is arduous, but important. And so essentially, what I used Search Console for was looking at all of our pages, which at this point is like over 1,500 pages, and figuring out ones that maybe are ranking okay, but they're not getting clicked through. And then looking at those meta descriptions and saying, okay, are they not getting clicked through because they're not answering people's questions? Like, how are these meta descriptions related to the keywords that people came in to this page from? and can we optimize it so that we get better click-through?
Mm-hmm.
I did almost that entire project just using Search Console, and like Google Sheets. So it's a very useful tool.
That's pretty impressive. FairShake exists as sort of the bleeding edge between like manual content SEO and like programmatic SEO, because like you have so many pages that it's just like on the cusp of like we need a system for this basically.
Yep.
That's super fascinating.
Constantly pushing the boundaries, first of Squarespace and now of WordPress, neither of which is the funnest thing to be doing. But
there you go. But at least you have to go through like a development team to like push out content. Awesome. So okay, so 2/3 of the strategy, we've got these super high intent landing pages. You know, how do I sue AT&T, or how do I get a refund? These educational guides that are sort of exist in the middle. They're a little bit lower intent, but they're still super valuable for educating folks about the various issues that they're likely to encounter with these different kinds of companies. And then the third piece is the link building. And so, obviously that was the piece that Optimist and our team was most heavily involved in our work together. Just for folks maybe on the stream who don't have a concept of what role that plays, can you just kind of characterize how link building fits into the overall strategy and what its importance is?
Yeah, I mean, the really high level summary is Google cares about how many people or how many sites link to your content. And then Google also cares about how many sites link to those sites that link to your content. So it's like this, it's a chain reaction, right? So what you want is domains or top level sites with high authority linking to your pages. That's really what it comes down to. It's a signal to Google and Bing that your content is of a good enough quality that these other sites will reference you, and you're a source of information. And you can get bogged down into more nitty gritty stuff, like the first link from a domain is going to be more powerful than any subsequent link. There's things like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the goal is to produce content and create relationships with other people and other publishers to drive links back to your site. Mm-hmm. And those links may not get you a single page view, and it kind of doesn't matter as much. Like, obviously traffic would be great. But like if you're reading an article in the New York Times, you're not necessarily going to click on FairShake's name and go to us when you're in the middle of a news article. But it doesn't really matter because we have a link back to our site, and Google says the New York Times is referencing them as a source. They get some equity for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then I think the other piece there is I guess like how, like, so building those links back to this content, and then that helps the other pages rank, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's cumulative, right? Our domain fairshake.com can gain authority and thus bring the authority level of all of our sub pages up. And that's really the ultimate goal. So it's not like we're going to drive all of our backlinks to this one page and focus all of our power on this one page. We want the whole domain to be benefiting from this strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I'm just thinking about there, like Lauren and Lou mentioned the New York Times. There's kind of like the broad backlink, trying to build a large profile of backlinks on a higher number of low authority sites. And then there's like at the far other end of this, the kind of PR game, which when we relaunched, we previously had a different name than FairShake. We were called Radvocate, and we relaunched the site as FairShake about in March of last year. and we brought on PR folks for that. And it's like, they don't really understand like backlinks and why you should care about them. But if you can figure out, either with them or independently, like how to play the PR game and get links at like very top sites, obviously that's gonna do some good for you. Actually, the New York Times is an interesting example because I don't think there's really much of any way to get a link from them unless maybe you appear in like their opinion content. But we've appeared in CNBC and I'll say like Time again, and the USA Today, and like all of these places where like those backlinks obviously are going to mean a lot as well. Yeah,
I think like the one takeaway that I always try to help people understand with the sort of that 3-part strategy, right? And we talked a little bit about this, like each piece kind of plays each type of content plays its own role within the confines of the strategy. But I think the challenge that people run into is they hear, hey, links are important. And so I'm going to go out and I'm going to take my guide that I wrote, and it might be a great guide. I'm going to try to get the whole world to link to it. And what they run into is that like inherently certain types of content are just more linkable. They receive more links for various reasons. And as Max, you mentioned like PR, right? Like that was a big part of the work that we did was, how do we create something that we can shop around to media or like other sites where there's sort of a natural reason why people would link and reference this content, which, yes, we're sort of approaching it from an SEO angle, but there is like a natural reason why that happens and why those pieces accrue links over time.
Yep. And like we get a lot of link building outreach these days as well, at least like every so often. And so much of it actually is like pretty scattershot and pretty terrible. And like you'll have some yield doing that because like you'll just end up getting the right person. But there's like it's certainly the higher up on the pyramid you get, like the more it rewards like spear phishing. Mm-hmm. At like the top at the top media companies, you've got to figure out like who's reporting on the space you're interested in and try to like pitch them an angle where they can write a story that like in order to write it, they'll have to link you. But like you have to do like a larger, like the more of someone's job you can do for them, the more likely you are to get a link out of it. And just doing like the scatter shot obviously is like you're doing less of that and you're less likely to get the result.
Link building lesson number 1, just do other people's jobs as a link building strategy. I love that. I love the irony of that, by the way, too, because like I feel like there are so many people who get those spammy, terrible pitch emails all day and delete them, and then turn around and like send their own versions of those same emails, thinking that that's like the way to build links, and it's like it just cracks me up. Awesome. Well, I want to pivot a little bit because Lou, I'm interested in your background prior to FairShake. I know you previously worked with Dictionary.com, and so I think like the way that I always think about it is like, what is kind of the goal with content marketing, and like what are we ultimately trying to achieve from a business perspective? And so I'm sort of struck by the potential two paths, right? So Dictionary.com, I'm curious what kind of the KPIs were there, and then what the KPIs are at FairShake, and sort of what you've learned in sort of making that transition.
Sure. Yeah. So Dictionary.com is very old compared to FairShake. They were founded in 1995. So just to put that in context, that's before Google was founded. Dictionary.com was a website on the internet. And honestly, like, it's a cute thing to say, but that was a big challenge for us, especially from an SEO perspective. Because what SEO came down to for us at Dictionary was defending our position. So growth was kind of a secondary thought. And I would even go so far as to say it wasn't until my last couple of years at Dictionary that we even attempted to grow using SEO. Most of our SEO strategy was around defending that number one spot that we had held for 20 years. And so like that in and of itself just completely changes the content strategy. The other piece of it is that Dictionary was ad-based. The revenue was all about programmatic ad impressions. So page views were very important. And then there was like other nitty-gritty stuff about like what a page view looked like. So obviously like bounce rates were very important. How far someone scrolls on a page is very important. So there's a lot of like UX, UI things in our content strategy that were almost more important than the content itself. And then the third thing about Dictionary is like it's a utility, it's a reference. So we were hit with seasonality traffic patterns quite a bit, right? You know, in the US, most kids are not in school between June and whatever, September, August. Our traffic would take like 20% plus hit. So like those were things that we were all comfortable with because we knew it was going to happen, but it definitely impacted what our content strategy could be. So when we started developing new content, so when I say new content, I mean not the dictionary, other content, other language content, we were trying to battle those three things. You know, how do we stop defending and start growing? How do we keep people on the page, but also get them to do a lot of page views, which is like not the most fun thing to do when you're just trying to tell stories. And then how do we beat the seasonality? Like, how do we produce content that will drive traffic during the months where all these kids are out of school and no one's looking up, you know, what does capitalism, like how do we get traffic to July, August? So honestly, like doing content marketing at FairShake is a breath of fresh air compared to that because we are not ad-based. We are not going to do silly UI, UX tricks to try and keep you on the site longer or try and get you to do, you know, 10 page views in a slideshow when really you could just kind of have read it in an article. We're not going to do that. We don't need to. And then we're growing into a space that is woefully empty. Like we're not really, you know, we're not trying to defend the top spot on this you know, query, what is capitalism, that is searched hundreds of thousands of times a month, right? Like we have a very specific target audience. We have a niche keyword set that we know we're going to rank on. We know we answer the question the best. And so there's like not a lot of risk with trying out new content and seeing where it goes and seeing what works. You know, we're baby. We're you know, a few years old. We can take risks with the customer in mind, and see where that goes. And so I think that's really shaped my content strategy with FairShake, which is like, all right, well, let's try video, or like let's do infographics. You know, just invest a little bit of time and money on this new idea and.
Yeah,
I don't know. Does that answer the question? I feel like I went on a tangent about dictionary. But
it's just super interesting to contrast the two strategies and the like where the businesses are in their stage. I mean, I've never worked someplace, for instance, where I've never worked with a client where our main goal was defending our existing search traffic. You know, so like that in and of itself shifts your strategy so profoundly that like it's just a completely different ballgame, really.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing that with us. Max, I want to talk to you. I think you're more involved in like the paid side. So I want to pivot a little bit because obviously, you know, FairShake is in the growth stage, and so I'm sure you guys are doing all kinds of stuff that I'm not even familiar with. But I know that paid acquisition is a big piece of the strategy outside of organic and SEO. So I'm curious, I guess, you know, first of all, just like how would you characterize, you know, does paid sort of complement organic, or is it a replacement, or how do you sort of view those two things side by side?
So the short answer is yes. It is a complement and can be a replacement. So I mean, we're actually, you know, we knock on wood, have like several like growth engines that are running at the same time for us right now. And so we do get substantial traffic and substantial, I'll say conversions. It means like submitted new claims for us from organic search, from paid search, from paid social, which is something has really been more of a focus over the past few months, and also increasingly from like paid peer-to-peer referral, which is not something that we had going on too much originally, but coming from like marketplace companies, that's a huge acquisition channel for a lot of them, and so that's one that I'm really pleased to see that we've got going as well. I think that obviously paid search and organic search are the two there that you can say may overlap with each other, and I think like the biggest fear is self-cannibalization, and I think we probably have some self-cannibalization where we're bidding on keywords on queries where the person would end up on our site anyway. But I think it's not so easy to back that out, and Google doesn't want you to be able to back that out so easily, because there are certainly cases where somebody puts in that same set of keywords and having the ad is what means they end up on our site, and somebody else, same set of keywords, they would end up on our site either way. So I think it takes some complex testing to really fully back that out, and we haven't really done that. One of the things about paid is that you have a little bit more control. Both, you obviously can buy your way hopefully to the top of the page, and you have more control and options over how you appear there. You get to write exactly the text you want. You get to include the little like sublinks and make them look like what you want. So Google is more and more creative about how to sell that real estate above the organic results. And it'd be great if we didn't have to pay for it, but a lot of times it makes sense to do it.
Yeah, I think that's. I see different companies that we work with. Some are really good and smart about figuring out how the strategies kind of complement each other and how they work together. Some people are like refuse to use paid, which I always think is interesting because like obviously I come from the world of content and SEO, so like I have a heavy bias, but like obviously paid works and has its role too within the strategy of growth, and especially when you're trying to build a company, like you have to kind of test all the different channels. But anyway,
we're a venture-backed business. Like people will be in different financial situations. That's obviously going to like impact that as well. But yeah. I mean, we're not. We do very well with organic traffic, I'd say, but we're not like too proud to pay for traffic as well when it's like people who it is people who we think will benefit from our message and will benefit from having them.
Yeah. I think that's a great mindset. I think. What are some of the metrics or the numbers that you're looking at behind the paid strategy?
Yeah. So basically, right. I mean, I mentioned conversions earlier, and so we basically look at a cost per conversion, and we think of our conversions a little bit like a qualified lead. So even though we're B2C, there's like once something comes in the door for us, there's a certain set of qualification criteria, like will that person click a link in a text message or email to verify their contact information, and will it clear some screening to make sure that the claim is like actually written in English, for instance, or like includes, we do actually want to take non-English speaking claims, but I mean more like English versus kind of some form of gibberish. But does it include something understandable enough that it could be sent to a company and they'll think like, yes, this is clear what went wrong here? Because ultimately we're looking at, things that we can drop in the mail and send to a company and start this legal process. So we're looking at cost per qualified lead. And then the other thing to think about as we like go into a channel is just what's the maximum volume in that channel. Because as I think about, thinking ahead quarters and years, we need to know, which channels do we expect to like have the most potential to scalably grow in, which is like probably Facebook, because Facebook's inventory, so to speak, is kind of unlimited. Whether there's going to be diminishing returns presumably, but with Google, there's much more of a hard cap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do those numbers? Is there anything about those numbers or metrics that is different from, I guess, let's say paid search versus organic versus SEO? Like, are you evaluating those channels differently?
Yeah, definitely. Because the thing about paid search, where talking about that that classic like cost per acquisition, CPA / CAC, customer acquisition cost / this like cost per qualified lead, like that's really that's you're paying upfront for one thing. And I think actually the value of organic is a lot harder to quantify in that sense, because you're creating this like sustainable stream, and you're doing it through basically like essentially a capital investment up front. And so, that tends to work in favor of organic traffic, because like I can look at Ahrefs, which is the tool we happen to use, and like they can give us their undoubtedly incredibly like rough approximation of, hey, like the monthly value of your organic traffic is something like $60,000. And like that actually means, right, that like what we've invested in organic up to date, it's paying us back that much every month. And so it's like, if you were to go back and like build a financial model around it, it is a very different form of strategy, actually.
Yeah, that is sort of interesting. And we could spend a whole another hour, I'm sure, getting into like attribution models and that kind of stuff, because Lord knows I would nerd out on that for an hour. But it is super interesting, because I think people do often think about sort of direct attribution of the content, right? So like people are coming from content, from search. How many of them are converting? What's the revenue that's being generated directly off of that single visit, which is problematic in its own ways. But then you've also got these other attribution considerations that you mentioned, right? So one is sort of the opportunity cost of like, if we had to pay for this traffic, like how much would that have costed us? And then you've got other like long-term implications of how long does this traction sort of sustain over time, and what's the long-term value of that investment up front. So yeah, anyway, without going too far down that rabbit hole, it's a super interesting discussion about that, and into the unit economics of that piece of the business. I guess long term, how do you think about organic versus paid, and sort of which one strengths or weaknesses of those two?
Yeah, my diplomatic answer on this, like, we want our business to go through organic as much as possible. But we also think our business pencils out if we have to do it, through paid acquisition. So it's like it's a TBD basically. I mentioned before as well the referral channel, and so like basically either repeat business, which for us is like we think of a transaction should pay for itself. We're not a subscription service. But having people come back because they were happy the first time, having people refer their friends, and then like paying people to refer their friends, like those are all, like good sustainable channels as well. So I think that it's hopefully it's everything. And as we like build it out looking long term, I think we have a pretty like balanced strategy the way I said we do right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I think that's such a critical thing, and especially as a venture backed company, being able to sit down and say, okay, here's one model, right? If content and SEO goes away tomorrow, like here's the paid, here's the trajectory if we're investing in paid, and then here's the trajectory if we can get content and SEO to work the way we think, and all that stuff. So yeah, from your perspective, I'm sure that you guys have many spreadsheets. I'm sure that that's sort of
it's good to feel like like kind of outrageous swings in one channel only have the potential to like hobble you and not actually topple you. I mean, like I get nervous feeling like too at the mercy of, Google algorithm updates or like Facebook, whatever updates that make it swing so wildly.
That's another big difference with dictionary. Like when all of your traffic is organic search, every little tiny thing that Google does has the potential to just like ruin your revenue for a month. So, us having this very balanced channel distribution takes a lot of pressure off, especially off of people like me who are like really focused on one of those channels. It's like, yes, I'm going to do my best to grow this one channel, but like it's not the only thing that's out there.
That is a definite benefit that maybe people overlook is having a little cushion there, a little comfort. Cool. So, well, speaking of other channels, what other channels are part of the roadmap or part of the strategy for FairShake's growth?
Well, Max touched on the referral thing and PR. Those are two channels that maybe I'll let you talk about, Max. But the other big like content thing that we're doing right now is jumping into video. And it's not really a distinct channel. It kind of is. It's still going to be organic search focused, but it's going to be trying to capture search that happens in YouTube, but it's also going to try and capture search in Google with a video result, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the new organic content world that we're jumping into.
Yeah, and I would say, Lou mentioned referrals, which I was saying about PR strategy, which is ongoing. I'm like excited there to see if we can crack local media, whether it's like local TV, or earned local TV or something, just for us, especially for something like us, which is kind of a money-saving product, is something that I see a lot of potential in. And then, I don't know, I'm always excited about new channels, but like, I also like, I don't want us to be chasing, how do we make this work on TikTok or something? You know, like, I think that it's good actually not to be, to have like too many channels that you really are like trying to chase after. Oh, the one other thing I was going to say, and like, this is really, really early stage, but I think the idea of basically finding ways to offer free product on your website that's like auxiliary, but related to our core paid product. So, I couldn't tell you exactly what that means right now, but like the types of things that somebody with a customer, with a need for help with customer support might be able to make real use of, whether it's like an app or whether it's statistics and data visualization or whatever else. Those sorts of things, because I think that that's a good, has good potential as content and traffic driver, link generation, et cetera.
Yeah. Do you view that? I don't know. Maybe you don't have like a vision for this yet, but is that like a free tool that people can use, or is it like a gated, like a lead gen piece, or how do you envision that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be well. I could see doing those either way, but what I'm most excited about is free, basically just free tooling.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's awesome. And Max, you actually touched on something that I'd love to get your take on, just as like thinking about startup growth in general. We talked about sort of the benefits of having a multi-channel strategy and having kind of a diversified growth path to growth. And then you also alluded to, at some point there's too much, right? You're trying to do too many things. How do you think about that as the head of growth and sort of balancing those two?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think, I think it's the earlier on you are and the more time time and just like resource constrained you are, the more it makes sense to limit it, and find the thing that works to get you to the scale you need to get to take the next step. But I think that as there's a little more, we're a team of 3 right now on the growth side. So myself, Lou, and Alec, who focuses on that referral channel and on some general like technical and special project stuff. And so, as we have a little more bandwidth on the team, I think it makes sense to like invest those eggs in more baskets, but then also be ready to like give up on the ones that don't seem worthwhile at the time. I think that sometimes things just won't work, or it won't be the time for it. I think that I don't know that there's any like rocket science in that answer.
You don't have a specific number, like X number of channels. This is the right one every time. No, that's too relevant, because that is obviously a really important consideration in someone in your role and startups of all sizes, really. 1.5
channels per team member. So like maybe
we got it.
That's probably around what you can support as like an early stage company.
There you go. All right. That's amazing. Well, thank you guys. Thank you both so much. I had just a couple final questions I'd love to get to. So, big picture question: what have been some of the biggest challenges for the team getting to this point?
Yeah, so I'll go first on that one, and then Lou, I think, has thoughts as well. Some of the stuff, especially earlier on, was just there's people who do not want us to be in this business, and those people are the big companies who are helping people take action against. And so we've had some pretty, especially Teal has had some pretty interesting conversations with those folks, and I think that we've reached a level of momentum and like kind of institutional buy-in that we have survived that phase of the potential culling process. And then, we're doing a complex thing in a brand new space. That's obviously a challenge as well, but what hasn't been a challenge is there's definitely demand for what we're doing. So there's a want and a need for it.
That's awesome.
I think the biggest kind of like personal challenge was coming up to speed on like a very niche world with its kind of its own language, its own terminology, and from like a content marketing perspective, like how do I translate this kind of obscure legal process into language that drives interest? And then I think the global challenge that we all face, which is our Lord and Savior Google, like you're beholden to an ununderstandable, untransparent Goliath, and for all the benefits that they provide us, like that's a big challenge. It's a constant challenge.
Yeah,
they're still better than Facebook, in my opinion.
I mean, I don't know that we want to start pitting the evil corporations each other, but yeah, I mean, it's never not going to be a challenge, but might as well throw it out there.
Yeah, that's Lou's thoughts there on the specific valence of Google are not on behalf of FairShake, as they're solely personal.
Personal opinion.
Also, our apologies go out to Zuckerberg. I'm sorry, Mark.
I'm not. Personal opinion.
There you go. How about victories? What have been some of the biggest victories for you all?
Actually, Lou, you want to lead off on that one?
Me to start? Yeah, I mean, I think being in a space where we can see that feedback loop from customers and just like the outpouring of positivity, like our reviews are not a simple, they get the job done. It's like, you saved my life. You are like, you're like God. I like people have literally said that. And so like seeing how much impact we've had on people's lives by just kind of saying, hey, by the way, this is in your contract. Do you want to take advantage of it? I think is a really empowering thing for me, especially during during this pandemic where people were sick and dying and not able to go to work. And then these big companies are still charging you cancellation fees or not letting you cancel your gym membership or, penalizing you for being late on your bill when it's like we're going through a global pandemic. And so being in a position to offer at least a little bit of help in those situations has been a big deal.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that really captures it. I would add on to that just like I'm a numbers guy, and so starting to see some of the growth we've seen, seeing those settlement numbers, seeing seeing our intake numbers, and that we can keep we're driving down our acquisition costs as we grow volume in our paid channels. Like we just like the sort of traction we're getting is something that I like a lot. And I'm also a sucker for legacy media. So like the Time Best Invention Award, like we got covered in the New York Times, we got covered in USA Today, we got like randomly found out that we appeared in like a print issue of Kiplinger's Personal Finance, which like I don't really know what that is, but they put it on like car commercials and stuff. So I do think it's fun, like being able to, and it like speaks to that, like, we're filling a real gap in the, in the marketplace. So I think that, there's so much like positive feedback and positive reinforcement.
That's awesome. Yeah, some amazing victories. Well, thank you both so much. We're at our hour here, so I won't keep you on too much longer. But really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And just inspiring to learn from everything that you've done so far. And best of luck as you kind of figure out the next phase here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Before we jumped off, I just wanted to say hi to Katie and Christina on your team. They're awesome, and I miss them. Thank you for all your help with our content. You too, Taylor, but
That's fine.
I wanted to say check out fairshake.com to learn more about us. If you have if folks have questions, like, I am cool with people reaching out to me, max@fairshake.com. And keep an eye on our story, I guess.
Awesome. Well, yeah. Thanks again. Thanks all for joining us on today's stream and learning a little bit about the FairShake story. As Max said, be sure to check them out, fairshake.com. And who knows, maybe they can help you out. All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.